Hey everybody, and welcome back. Well, the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice that I've made my decision on the forks. So I took the front end out so I could check a few things, and I will tell you what I found in a moment. First of all though, I'm actually doing this introduction before the video before it has been released, shall we say. It's actually, you've got to convert them from the format in the camera to what you can upload, so that's happening as we speak. And I'm just wondering how many comments I'm going to get about my nuts. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the other reason thing is I'm not wearing my coat because it's just over 80 degrees, it's a bit warm today, so I'm wearing my Mick Andrews Trials Training School that Mick gave me 17 years ago, I guess. Mick's a friend of mine. Great teacher, didn't do me any good of course. Alright, so took the old forks out and I played around to see what was what. I mentioned that I'll probably take this off, and it turns out I don't have to, because they're the ones we're taking out. And there's the Yamaha 650 one, and as you can see, they're identical. They're identical except the diameter. The diameter at the top is perfect, so it goes straight into the top bearing, but this one is wider at the bottom. And unfortunately it's a tube, actually it's a double drawn tube, it's unusual. But because it's a tube, I can't just turn it down in the lathe or there won't be enough wall thickness left. So what we're going to do is, this is welded in. Tell you what, let me show you close to. Now the first thing you'll notice is we've got a little bit more offset from the stem to the forks. It's not a lot, it's nowhere near what the Norton is. The Norton one is right out here somewhere. But it's going to help, as I say, with clearance to the tank. And basically, although I've mentioned it before, for a long time I've been looking at these forks and thinking, I really don't like them. Anyway, so what are we going to do? Because, as I say, we want to have this OD there. Well, this one, we're going to put it in the lathe and we're going to turn, you can see it's welded in. We're going to turn that weld out so we can take the tube out of this bottom yoke. Then this one is welded in the same, but what we're going to do here, because remember we're going to a smaller OD, is we're going to actually bore this and basically use it as a sleeve. We're going to bore this until it's going to be a nice tight fit on the other tube. Then, because I've got to hold it in the lathe, so I'll do it with that like that, I'll cut this off flush and we'll press this one into there. I'm going to leave the bearing on here when I take it out, because it's going to give me a guide as to the height that I want this tube to be. So if when I've taken that out of there, I press it into this one until that bearing is just nicely seated, I know that our height is going to be the same for the mods we made to the steering head on the frame. So you might think it's a lot of work, which it is, and we might have a few people thinking, why am I doing it? But those of you who've been watching them for a while know that I like a little challenge. I also like to use watts to hand. I mean, I could just go out and buy a pair of Norton forks with a disc brake, but I ain't going to. So we're going to do it, and let's go and get going on the lathe. As you can see, hang on, let me put this in neutral. I've only just, well, I've got an inch or two, but don't have a lot of swing over this. Certainly not enough to get right up to it. So I'm going to use a boring bar and take that bit of welding off. So let me get set up properly and then I'll show you a little bit of that. I'll continue with that. I don't want to bore you with it. Haha, that's for you, Dick. But what I don't want to do, I want to just take off enough weld, because I don't really want to shorten the stem at all, because it's got to go in the other one and be a good solid fit. So let me finish turning this, and then we'll come back. I think that's got all the weld off, so let's see if we can press this out. Doesn't that always give you the bloody nightmare? Anyway, there it is, out. Stage 2. Now, as I mentioned, I've left this on as a guide to the depth. This is 1.103 inches. So I've got the boring bar in. I'll tidy this end up a little bit, and then we're going to turn the inside of this out to be a couple of thou to get a press fit on this. You saw how tightly the other one in, although amazingly enough it was rusty. How the hell it rusts inside there, I don't know. But anyway, that's the plan now. We're going to turn this, bore this out to be a nice tight press fit on this, and then we'll press it in up to this bearing. I'll get a new bearing later, but then we'll weld this into the bottom. You may notice I chamfered the end of this before I took it out the lathe so that I'd have a route to put the weld into. Can you hear that? It was a beautiful blue sky where I walked down here. I don't even have a jacket with me, never mind anything else. Anyway, there it is, in there. See, we're chamfered, ready to weld it. Now, because it's not exactly easy to check this is square, what I'm going to do before I weld it up is I'm going to put the top yoke on and I'm going to put the forks in. And in that way, when it's all clamped up, everything will be held exactly right and I can weld that in. I don't know if you heard me over the rain, but I said to weld the stem in to the bottom yoke, I was going to put the forks together so it would hold everything in line. So I did that, and you see that? Well, look at it. This bottom here is twisted up and like that. So, actually there's a bit of a story. You see these are done in British Racing Green. I put Yam 650 forks in the Interceptor I did to get the disc brake, and I painted that in this colour. So when I pulled these out of the box I thought, I wonder why I didn't use these, why I painted them and then didn't use them on the Interceptor. Well, now we know why. When I put them in the frame and put the forks in, it's bent. So I've had a quick look at the forks. I haven't actually taken the stanchions out, but I rolled them on this table with just the legs sticking out, and the legs didn't seem to wobble at all. So, what to do? Well, I reckon we have 3 options. So I'm going to draw you in and show you them. Right, option 1, straighten this. Well, as you can see, this is a pretty hefty thing and you've got to get them right. Plus, although that side is more or less just plain, this has got a lump in it, so I don't think it would be very easy to do that. So I don't think that's much of an option. But the second option was simply to get another bottom yoke, which, as it happened, there was a couple on eBay, and this one was only $20. With some shipping it was $30 something, so we're talking 20 odd quid. And I wanted a set of yokes anyway, because I have another project in mind. So I thought, alright, I'll get them as a backup. I can always take this stem out and, swap the stems over, go with the original plan. Or, I got thinking to myself, I actually have, these are the Norton yokes. Now, I found these with the frame all those years ago, and the stem was in here, they were in the frame, and I could not get them apart. So in the end what I had to do was, they weren't tight in the frame, I had enough room to get a hacksaw in, so I cut the stem off. Now then I put them to one side because I tried and tried again to get the stem out and I couldn't. So anyway, I got them out, cleaned them up, and the only way I could get the stems out, or the stem out of each end, was I cut them flat and then put a hacksaw blade through, you know, took it off the frame, put it in, put it back in the frame, and then cut through the tube twice, because luckily it's just a thick walled tube, it's not a solid stem. And then of course it just collapses, one little piece falls out and they come straight out. So I got them out. Alright, Yam 650 forks, 35mm stanchions. Norton a 34.5. And the other thing is, this here, actually this was the same size I think. Let me pull these off here. This stem is the same size at the top as that stem. And actually it's a better fit than that. So I have a couple of things I have to do to these to use them. I've decided to use them. I thought, you know, let's go the whole hog. Let's go machining mad. So I'll need to bore out these to be 35mm, which isn't that difficult. And then I'm going to make a new stem. So the stem will press into there, they'll bore out to 35mm, that's done. The top, the stem will fit in without any modification, but like most British forks, these are tapered, and then there'll be a big nut on the top, and you know, that would pull the forks up into there. Whereas the Yamaha ones are the same diameter all the way up, so they have a clamp. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a clamp for these. I'll show you that in more detail to clamp those up. The other thing, of course, is we don't have a clamp here. The Commando forks, strange. I can't remember which way it is, but you can't buy a stem, for instance. You only get the stem with the yoke. But I've got a feeling it's actually a press fit in the top, because there's a big nut that goes on the bottom. But the other interesting thing is the bearings. The bearings are actually ball bearings. They look like two big wheel bearings. That goes in the bottom, there's a bearing, then there's a spacing tube, just like in a wheel hub, then that goes on the top, and that's it. So I wanted to put that's another reason actually why I'm making a stem, because I want to use those taper rollers, which are exactly the right size for the top. God, you're getting more talking than working in this video, aren't you? So anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes. So really, this would normally, like these forks, would be split and have a pinch. So I don't know whether to split them and make a third pinch point here, or what I was also thinking I could do is drill this, and then in the stem mill a slot. So put all the forks together, drill this and go through a little bit with a drill to mark the stem, and then mill a slot in the stem and just put a big grub screw, or set screw as I would say here, and then that would hold that. That would be a lot easier than making up another thing. So anyway, let's get set to. I'm not going to show you a lot of machine work. As I say, we're not a machining channel, but I'll show you the setups and what have you. So the first thing I'm going to do is bore these out to 35mm. And what I've done, I don't know if you can see it, is I put a little spacing piece in there so I could clamp this up. So that's nice and tight. I can bore it 35mm, and then it'll have the bit of take up to clamp onto the fork leg. So let's get set up for that. Well, this is the setup I'm using for the yokes. I've got it clamped down through the stem hole, and the back of the stem hole is square. I've checked this, these are perfectly horizontal in both directions, both of these, so I know I'm going to be boring perpendicular. Now this second clamp isn't so much to hold it down as it's actually up against the steering stop. Right, we're going to be boring in this direction, so the cutter would tend to be pushing it that way, so that's basically, although I think this will hold it, that's just to stop it moving. I've used the test indicator and not the coaxial center finder because of the split in there. those coaxials are not particularly robust, the little pointer. So if that was even going around slowly, because I don't see the point in doing it by hand. You might as well use one of these if you're just going to turn it by hand. So I didn't want the little pointer to be smacking into that gap all the time. So anyway, I've looked through the camera. I don't know if you can see this, but anyway, I've got this centered here. So now I'll bore that one and then move over, do it exactly the same, and then the top yoke will put in and bore in exactly the same way again, same setup. So let me do all that and then we'll come back. Right, so there's the bottom yoke done. This little, I don't know if you can see it in the thing, I keep saying that, don't I? This little gap here is actually for the fork shrouds to go in. It's not that I've made them huge. The other thing I forgot to mention, but which of course I fortunately did check, the yokes are the same width. Actually, they're almost exactly the same width. So the wheel will go in. Don't worry, we're not going to finish all this and then find the wheel won't fit in. So that's the bottom yoke done. As I say, I don't have to touch this. Actually, I don't have to touch this on either of them, because this one, I'm making a new stem, so I just make the stem to fit. And as I say, the top one is actually the right size for the stem to take the bearings we're using. So let me set up the top yoke and bore these out, and then we can look at what I'm going to do to make clamps. I'm ready now to bore out the last one of these, and I thought I'd just forestall comments from our more machining savvy viewers who are going to say this should be supported. Well, I'm only taking 20 thou off here altogether, and I'm doing it in several cuts, so they're only a few thousand per cut. This thing is a really robust ribbed cast steel item. I don't think I'm going to get that much flexure from this cut, and because they're split and they get clamped up, we've got a little bit of leeway as well. So I thought I'd just mention that before you all started shouting at me that I should have something under there. So there's the two yokes on. Now I've set these 6 1/4 inches from there to there, which is the size of the headstock. And you may remember that with the Yamaha forks in, we had 7 inches between those, and it's 7 inches. So we're about right all round 6 1/2 inches, and they're supposed to have 6 inches of travel, I think. Okay, so now I've got to make the little clamp up parts. Right, this is the piece of steel I'm going to use for the steering stem. I've got it set up. It's in the 3-jaw, but this burner, it's a really accurate 3-jaw. But I've got it in here with a live center to give it some support, and I have run along the length with an indicator, so I know I'm all right. Now I've already just skimming it down actually, because this steel was I think 1 1/8, has got me to the right diameter for the bottom bearing. That's where the bottom bearing is going to go. That's the part that I've got to turn down to fit into the bottom yoke. This is just a little ramp to make it easier to get the bearing on. And I've actually marked here, although I didn't need to, now I think about it, the distance, which is the thickness of the top yoke and the thickness of the bearing. But I actually want to turn this all the way down to here, to that thickness, because you don't want to have to be pressing the bearing this whole length. You only want the bearing to be pressed onto the little bit, just slightly wider than you need for the bearing itself. So as I say, the idea of this top bearing is exactly right to be a nice sliding fit through the top yoke. So I'll turn this down all the way to here, the idea of the top bearing, make a little bit of an angle there just to guide it up, just a chamfer to guide it up onto there. That stays as it is. This is going to get turned down to the size to be a press fit into the bottom yoke. So I'll get set to and do this and come back when I've done the turning. This is the first bit of the turning done, so there's the fit. Come on now, be a good boy. There's the fit for the bearing. As I say, that's also just a nice fit on there. So I'll start and do the other end now. I'm going to do it in here, working from this end so that I can keep everything absolutely concentric. We won't take it out and try turning it round. Just thought I'd show you how I'm going to work from this end in case you were wondering. I don't know if this is the right procedure, but I've used my cut-off tool to go in, that's the exact length there, and cut out enough deeper than I'm actually going to turn this to get, I can never remember whether it's a right-handed or a left-handed tool. What is it? It's a right-handed tool because it's going to the right, I think. Anyway, I can now go in and turn that way. So I will. Alright. There's our stem, our yokes. Now I don't have the stem welded in yet. You can see there the piece for the bottom bearing, and when the top bearing is in here, that will actually be up there, like that. So I'm not going to weld that in, same as before. I'm going to put the forks in and get everything held together. The other thing I haven't done is I haven't tapped this. I'm going to tap that 3/4 fine. Just have a nice big nut so that when that's on there, it'll actually be down there. We can pull it up, because normally they would be threaded on the outside and on this big nut goes on. But we're going to do it on the inside because it's easier. But having said that, I've got every tap, including a 3/4 coarse thread, except 3/4 fine. And since they're $40 odd, which is, you know, getting on for 30 quid, I phoned Steam Shop Dave and he's got one. So I have that to tap, but that's mine. So let's get on and look at what we're going to do with this top yoke. Now this is what we're going to duplicate. These pinch bolts here at either side. And the way we're going to do it is as follows. I've cut 2 pieces of 3/4 round, and they're going to go on there. So I'm going to drill them 5/16 to hold the pinch bolt, and then I'm going to put a scallop in to more or less match the curve of that, and then we'll weld them on. And then when they're welded on, we'll slice through the whole thing, and that will be our space to pinch up to tighten on the fork stanchion. So you could cut that with a hacksaw, but I'm going to put it on the mill and use the slitting saw. So the first thing I'm going to do, these are just, as you can see, rough cut in the bandsaw, is I'm going to face these off, clean them up, and put a little bit of a chamfer on each end. Then I'll drill them through 5/16, as I say. So as that's not exactly very exciting, I'll go away and do that. I've cut 2 pieces, and as you can see, I've marked them in the centre. What I'm going to do is, with a cutting disc, to start with, I'm just going to cut a V out, and that will make it a lot easier to make the scallop rather than trying to sculpt it and sculpt it and sculpt it. I'll just cut the major portion of the stuff out, and then we'll get some curve into it. So as there'll be sparks flying everywhere, I'll move you out the way and do this first one. So there's the V cut out. As I say, that takes the majority of the metal out, and then that fits there. So all I've got to do now is just shape it a little bit to follow more of a curve. There we've got our curve, which fits that a lot more closely, and as you can see, we've got a nice big gap here. Although we're touching, we'll be able to fill this in with weld, and that will make it really strong on here. And then, as I say, we'll cut our slit through. I think I'm going to put them at the sides. I don't know. One thing I don't want to do is I'm going to put them round a little bit like that, so that this has plenty of space towards the tank. One of the things about using these was, of course, it's going to give us a lot more clearance to the tank. So I don't want to take away the clearance by putting that round there. So I think we'll sort of put that like that. I might even walk over and just
check it to see which way is which. Okay, so next thing to do then is for me to clamp that up and actually weld that on. Now I've got both of these on. I'm not going to touch it because it's hot. And I made two slight changes. One, you can see I've bronzed it. I tigged the ends to hold it on, and then there was such a sort of, because of the curves, there's a big gap. And I thought, you know, I'll fill that in with bronze and then I can smooth it all out, and that'll give it a much better joint. The other thing I did was, although the Yam ones are 8mm, which is 5/16, I looked at this and I thought, no, let's make them 3/8, the same as the bottom. So I drilled them out to 3/8 before I put them on. So I'll let it cool down. I'll give it a sandblast to get the what's it off. What do you call the what's it? I know you can wash it off. The flux off. And then I might even sand them up a little bit just to get some nicer curves and what have you. And then we'll stick it in the mill, cut some slots in, and that's done. And the last operation with these, we're going to slit them. I've sanded this a little bit. So I've got that in there, so this is nicely horizontal, vertical and everything. Marked it out halfway through, so let's see if we can cut a slot. And there we go. I'll do the other side and then I'll put them on the forks. Right, let's see if we have a big enough slit. That's there. There we go. Well, yeah, we'll go a bit more. Oh yeah, that's good and tight. Now one other thing actually, you see these have plugs in. Oh, I meant to mention something about the plugs. Where is it? What have I done with it? Bugger. Hold on a second. Alright, I'm back. Should never be stuck for an Allen key. You know, you keep coming across these big ones and what have you, and you run down to the hardware shop or whatever, and they only have, you know, up to 10mm, something like that. This is 17mm. But unlike a spanner, where you're stuck, all you've got to do is find yourself a bolt that size. Right? What I've actually done here is bronzed a nut on, but if you want, you can just use a bolt, put a couple of nuts on and lock them up, and then you just put your spanner on this end and you've got your Allen key. Just a smaller side. Alright, what I was going to say is there's a place down in Miami that sells Yamaha XS 650 stuff, and he gets things made, and instead of these plugs he has some exactly the same with the O-ring, but they have a hex head, so it's just like the British ones. So I might get a couple of them because they'll look nicer than just that plug, to have the big hex head on there. Alright, next thing is the stem. So here's the bottom yoke finished, got the bearing on, got that welded in there and got that threaded. Now if you're wondering why I'm using such a big bolt for the top, this actually is this is just to put it all together now for our test fit. What I'm going to do is get a stainless steel one of these and then put it in the lathe and put a nice dome on it. So rather than have just a little bolt head in the middle, I thought it would look nice with a bigger domed bolt. So let's go and see if these forks will fit. Got the bearings in the headstock. So our bottom one in and the top bearing. There it goes. This little spacing piece. Okay, it's that on. And that goes on. Also, this big bolt is actually just to really to set the pressure on the bearings, to load the bearings, I should say. Right, so there's our yokes in. Come on, there you go. Like that. Oh, while you were away doing whatever you were doing, in between the last video and this one, I cut the slots a little bit wider, more or less the same width as the bottom ones. I noticed they were a lot bigger, so I just matched them up. Now, is it going to line up? Hey! Another thing I'm thinking about is, rather than having a bolt through here, this is 3/8. I'm about right, I could thread this 7/16, so not have a nut on this end, but I don't know. I might make up a little end cap. But right now, all I'm pleased with is that things lined up. Next big question, will the wheel go in? As I mentioned, these yokes are basically, to within about 1/8 of an inch, I think, the same distance centre hole to centre hole for the forks as That's the Yamaha 650 yokes. So that goes up there, like this. Should have put a little bit of wood under here. It's not a particularly heavy wheel. That goes in there. Hey, stop twiddling about. Come on now. Be a good boy. There we go. Come on. Stop messing about. Let me put a little. Uh-oh. There it goes. Ta-da! Alright, well let me pull you back a little bit. You know, I keep getting all the focus instead of the zoom. But I can't pull you back anymore. I can do it physically. So, I tell you what, you're right. They look a lot better than the Kawasaki ones with a bit sticking up and the wheel spindle here. Now, one other thing is, I'll show you this in a minute. I checked the drawings, and on the Commando, that's 7 inches from there to there, and it's 7 inches from here to here. So we've got that same. They both have 6 inches of fork travel, but this has only got about 6 inches to there. The Commando's got 7.5. So that means there might be a little bit of a problem with this coming up with the mudguard on hitting here. But the chap I mentioned in Miami, because he sells all sorts of stuff for custom Yam 650s, does fork tubes, stanchions, that are 2 inches longer. So when we get this down on the ground and we sort of start making all our measurements, now we should be right back to having the right wheelbase and everything. I might possibly, these are pretty good, I might possibly get the slightly longer ones. But other than that, everything is fine. And the other thing is, I can't see it now because I've got the wheel in, but I've got loads of space here. So I'm going to put proper clip-ons on. Now, I have a pair of 35mm clip-ons, but you've heard me say this before, they're here somewhere but I don't know where they are. So we'll have to see, I might have to buy a pair. I've looked all over, still can't find them. So anyway, long time coming, as I say. I don't know if you noticed, I've got that one is broken. I'm going to have to repair that. But I wish I'd thought of doing that in the first instance. I half did, but it was a lot of work. And I had the Quacker forks. I thought, oh, that's put them in. You know, it was meant to be built up from what was to hand. So anyway, that I think now is definitely the front end done. Obviously, of course, I turned this disc down. As you can see, it's well, actually, depends on where the caliper goes. But I can get discs and all that sort of stuff. I'm not worried. And I have to buy a caliper for this anyway, because I don't think I have a Yam caliper. All right. One very last little thing I'll show you, just as a matter of interest for you. Now, if any of you were wondering how I knew that Yam engine was going to fit in the Commando, this is something I've done lots of times building specials in the past. What you do is you find yourself a nice picture of the bike, completely sideways on, not sort of, I don't know, like this one, at a bit of an angle. You want it completely sideways on. Then you get yourself your ruler and you find something you know the length of. Now, for instance, this has got a 19-inch wheel. So we measure from the wheel spindle to the rim and we see how many millimeters it is. And this works out to be in 0.633. multiplied by the number of millimeters is the number of inches. So for instance, on those forks I was just able to measure there yoke, the gap yoke to yoke, and the gap from the fork leg to the bottom yoke, and then just convert it to inches. I mean, it's not 100% accurate, but it is so close. So as I say, when I was doing the engine, I was able to measure the height of the frame and the front to back and all that. So just if you're thinking of doing something and you're wondering whether it'll work, find yourself a couple of pictures and start measuring. Okay, that's about it for today. As I say, it was a long time coming, but we got there in the end, so we'll have to think of the next thing. But in the meantime, as you know, go off and enjoy yourselves.